Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is being blasted by the energy sector with bold statements he's making at the climate conference that will have a direct impact on Alberta's oil and gas sector. To talk about this in more detail is political reporter Brian Lilley, joining us once again from Toronto. Now, Brian, the PM says Canada set that target of net zero emissions by the year 2050 and action needs to be taken right now, but that action will have serious repercussions for our energy sector here.
He's talking about being Canada being the very first country to put in hard caps on emissions in oil production. So, and then he turned around and called it the same Glasgow climate conference for other energy producing countries to do the same. So Canada's going first. You know, this just leaves me scratching my head. How this is an industry that employs thousands upon thousands of people. It generates a ton of money for the federal government. And yet, here we are saying, we don't really want this industry anymore. We don't need this industry anymore. He's doing the same thing. It's interesting. If you remember, during the election campaign, Paul Desmarais of the Desmarais family, long attached to the Liberals, but perhaps no more, wrote a scathing LinkedIn post about how Trudeau has gone after the energy industry for years. Now he's going after Canada's other successful industry, which is banking. This is a guy who looks at what we have and decides we don't need that anymore. So it puts the entire energy industry in a very difficult position. Of course, Elizabeth May, who appears to be leader of the Green Party once again after booting the woman that replaced her, well, she's saying this doesn't go far enough. We need to cap production, not emissions.
Brian, what's interesting too is that so many countries, developing countries around the world, are increasing their demand for fossil fuels. And there are many countries, including Norway, ramping up their oil and gas exploration to help meet the demand. But Canada, not so much.
Joe Biden was at the G20 summit in Rome begging OPEC producers to increase production, to drive down prices. And, you know, we're saying we're going to make it more difficult to produce here. You've got China and India increasing the use of coal as a fossil fuel for energy. You know, there was a piece in the New York Times, of all places, I mean, the liberal Bible, the New York Times, talking about all of China's coal use in terms of setting up energy plants across their vast country. And what's Canada doing? Well, if you remember back in 2019, Andrew Scheer suggested we could help in terms of reducing global greenhouse gas emissions by exporting our natural gas to places like China and India. That was something that was ridiculed by the Liberal Party, by Justin Trudeau, by much of the media, and yet that very thing could be lowering emissions in a way that we won't see in China otherwise.
You know, I'm wondering a lot of times for these G20 summits, some of these climate conferences, why don't the leaders go after countries which are the bigger polluter emitters, including China and India? I mean, Canada, worldwide, what is our emissions, global emissions, 1.5% that we contribute?
It's between 1.5% to 2%. It depends on the year, but it's within that range. So it's a very small amount. And China is increasing theirs by more. But the agreement that China signed on to, it goes back several years to the Obama administration, if you recall. The agreement they signed on to allows China to continue increasing emissions until 2030, while the rest of us have to sign an economic suicide pact in order to, I don't know, it's some sort of desire to say we are better, so we will sacrifice ourselves. China, India, Russia, they do not have to sacrifice in the way that we do. There's a reason that a lot of people say these things are just designed to hamper wealthy Western countries because it lets everyone else off the hook as they increase their emissions. So it's very difficult for someone in Canada, especially in Western Canada, to see what the benefit of all of this is. We seem to be going out of our way to ruin our own industries.
Our Premier here in Alberta, Jason Kenney, says Prime Minister Justin Trudeau should be promoting Canada's success. And Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe said if other oil-producing nations were adopting Canada's standards, that emissions from oil production globally would fall by 25%. Now, is the Prime Minister making these points?
You would wish that he was making these points and saying, look, Canada's a leader in producing oil in a safe, environmentally sustainable way. You know, I don't care where you sit on the issue of greenhouse gas emissions, climate change. we need oil for the foreseeable future. If you are all in on climate change, we still need oil for this foreseeable future to do what the activists keep calling towards a green transition. So if we need oil now, why not make sure that we're getting our oil from a sustainable, environmentally responsible producer like Canada? But Justin Trudeau is not making that position. Neither's the new mayor of Calgary, by the way, Jody Gondak. I'm looking at these two, and as I was writing in the Sun this week, it's as if we're governed by people that don't like what Canada is. Justin Trudeau, just like his father, doesn't like the Canada that he sees. He wants a fundamentally different country. And the fact is, we are drawers of water, hewers of wood, drillers of oil, and we do it in the most environmentally sustainable way. And yet we still denigrate ourselves on the world stage and say, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa, please forgive us. We're prostrating ourselves in asking forgiveness from the rest of the world while the rest of the world continues on as if nothing's happening. It's something that just boggles the mind in terms of how we act at these things. But then again, this is a prime minister that seems to not care about any of Canada's major industries, as I mentioned earlier.
What boggles the mind as well is how many politicians who are anti-oil saying we don't need oil. Think about what oil goes into, not just vehicles, but to heat homes. Rubber, which goes onto your shoes, and plastics for car parts. I mean, it's used worldwide in so many different industries. Now, Brian, you've been taking the PM to task over his failure to secure a meeting with U.S. President Joe Biden to deal with some of those protectionist measures that hurt our auto industry. Speaking of automobiles, has Trudeau been able to set up any kind of an important meeting with Biden whatsoever?
At this point, not yet. And, talk about hurting another major industry. He's already sacrificing the oil and gas industry. He will soon, as I mentioned earlier, go after the financial industry. And when it comes to autos, Joe Biden, his buddy in Washington, liberals and Democrats, when they're in Ottawa and Washington, are supposed to get along. Trudeau can't get a meeting. His officials can't get high level meetings with their counterparts in Washington. They get junior level meetings with their counterparts. And Biden has this proposal in his Build Back Better budget that will give a $12,500 rebate for someone who buys an electric car. And electric cars, Hal, over the last several years have come down tremendously. It's not just wealthy people buying $100,000 Teslas to show off, to virtue signal, or as a plaything. You can get an all-electric Ford Mustang for $43,000. You take that $12,500 rebate that the U.S. government says it'll give you, it brings it down to just about the cost of a regular Mustang. Okay, maybe I'll consider it now. But here's the catch. To get that rebate, the car has to be assembled in America with 50% American parts and an American-made battery. So that will mean that any future decisions on where to put investment in terms of auto plants, auto assembly, parts plants, that's going to be driven down to the United States. This is something that Justin Trudeau should be working on. Right now, the best hope that we have for stopping this and other protectionist measures that are in the budget, this is just the biggest one. The biggest hope we have is West Virginia Democrat Joe Manchin, who says, no, this is too much spending. Joe Manchin seen as a moderate, middle-of-the-road Democrat and often offside with the majority of his party. He's saying he's not going to vote for it at this point. That's subject to change, could change at any moment given how Washington works, but he's doing more on this than Justin Trudeau is, and he doesn't even care about this issue. He's worried about the spending in the bill.
Let's circle back to an electric Mustang for just a second. Brian, that ain't right. I attended a lot of show and shines this past summer, and I talked to a lot of muscle car aficionados. They're, Challengers, Cudas, Mustangs. They're like, you call that thing a Mustang, that SUV electric? No, that's not a Mustang. Brian, following the announcement of PM Trudeau's cabinet, we discover that our Prime Minister does not have his Foreign Affairs Minister, Melanie Joly, with him in Europe, but instead he has this new Environment Minister, Stephen Guilbeault. What is that really telling us?
Look, I've said to you before that Justin Trudeau doesn't take foreign affairs seriously. This is his fifth minister in 6 years. And some people said, well, Stephen Harper had a lot too. Yeah, but he also had John Baird in there for a solid 4+ years. Melanie Joly comes in after Marc Garneau was in the job for just about 10 months. Somebody who has deep experience in the department pointed out that Trudeau's ministers They don't travel. Stéphane Dion also didn't have a meeting with Trudeau in his entire first year as being foreign minister. They didn't sit down. They didn't have a phone meeting. They just didn't talk. And this is the guy representing Canada on the world stage. And now we have Melanie Joly. There's a G20 meeting. There is a visit to Holland. There is a visit to Scotland for the UN Climate Change Summit. You might want to have her in on a few meetings. Well, her officials say, oh no, she's busy studying her binder. If she wants to get to know the file, take the binders, they fit in a suitcase, and get on the plane and go. I mean, we've got enough people there. Jerry Butts is there. Catherine McKenna is there. All the environmental activists are over there. Why isn't the foreign affairs minister? Justin Trudeau doesn't take this file seriously. I don't think he takes Melanie Joly seriously. But what he does take seriously is his radical activist environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault, who, he doesn't have a secret agenda. He doesn't have a hidden agenda, Hal. It's out in the open. And he's coming for Alberta's #1 industry.
Brian, many people have been saying there's a certain amount of hypocrisy when it comes to certain politicians. Close to 500 private jets landed in Scotland for a climate summit, and we also see Trudeau wearing a mask for photo ops and then maybe not wearing masks when he's out partying. What kind of a message do you think this is sending to Canadians?
Hey, let me deal with the mask issue first, because that happened late last week, over the weekend. He's in the Netherlands for the meeting with Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte. He's got a mask on every time there's an official photo. And then he's out in a restaurant. He's got his arms around people. He's backslapping. He's walking down the street with Rutte holding a bottle of wine he either, took or somebody bought or somebody gave him from the bar. He's walking down the street with it. Neither one of them are masked. But if he's anywhere for an official photo, he's got the mask on. It just sends a message that this is just theater as far as he's concerned, while he lectures the rest of us. And speaking of lecturing, you and I shouldn't take vacations unless we're the Prime Minister going to Tofino on a somber national holiday. But 400 to 500 private jets on the tarmac. You've got the Prime Minister, you've got Prince Charles, Prince William, you've got the Prince Albert of Monaco, all these people who lecture us ad nauseum, flying in and clogging up the tarmacs in Glasgow and Edinburgh, because those are the two main airports going into Scotland, and they're only about 45-minute drive apart. They are showing the world that this too is theater for them. This is something that they're going to talk to us about, but not do anything about. There's billboards up and down the UK showing both Prince Charles and Prince William, and it says that they've got a fleet of cars, a private jet, a private train, but they lecture us on climate change. And these billboards are calling for a republic in the UK. That's how angry many people are over this hypocrisy. Oh, and by the way, Boris Johnson's going to fly from Glasgow to London. It's not a very long flight. I've done it for a connector, but you could drive or take the train, and it wouldn't take much longer.
Wow. Brian, Remembrance Day is coming up, and federal Conservative leader Erin O'Toole has called for the flag on federal buildings to be raised up once again in time for Remembrance Week so that it can be lowered on Remembrance Day. What is the reaction of the government to this?
The reaction so far is we're not doing anything. Heritage Canada responded to this issue last week saying we're waiting for the Prime Minister to tell us what to do. And until he tells us to raise them back up, they're not going down. This started after I had a chat with Erin O'Toole last week and wrote a column about it saying that it's time for the flag to go up. It's been 5 months. It was 5 months at the time. It's now just over 5 months since the flag was lowered at the end of May. And I understand why the flag was lowered at the end of May. The discovery of 215 unmarked graves in Kamloops, shortly thereafter, more than 700 in Cowessess. Yes, we knew those graveyards were there, but this was a marking them. This lowering your flag is a somber, commemorative way to recognize something that is truly sad. And it's not done often, which is why it's such a powerful symbol. Countries do not lower their flags unless they're surrendering or in a commemorative way like this. And so we've lowered the flags to half-mast, but we've left them there for 5 months. That takes away from the power of the gesture, Hal. Erin O'Toole told me, and he put this in an op-ed that he wrote for us at the Sun as well, saying, look, we all want to move towards reconciliation, But that doesn't mean we keep the flag down forever. And it's time to raise it up for Remembrance Week. That's not going to happen unless the Prime Minister gives an order soon. We've already missed other times that we would lower the flag, such as the National Day to remember fallen firefighters. There's a separate National Day for fallen police and peace officers. When premiers die, past premiers like Bill Davis here in Ontario, there's a memorial for him later this week. He died a couple of weeks ago. That's when you lower the flag, and you lower it for a day as a symbol, a powerful symbol. We've left it down for 5 months and we haven't marked those other occasions. We may not be marking Remembrance Day, and that's simply wrong. It's not just me saying that, it's just not just O'Toole. Many in the Indigenous community are saying so as well.
Lest we forget. Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks again for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.